Welcome to the Company Move podcast, where we explore what life outside of the film and television industry could look like by talking to folks who have made the leap. I'm your host, Rennie Pollock, a union second assistant camera person currently living and working in Chicago, Illinois. I'll be learning and growing along with you, so let's go. Company's on the move. Aaron Ward was born and raised in Kansas City and moved to Oregon when he was 20 years old. His very first job was at his parents' daycare center when he was in high school, and he worked for years in service industry and customer service jobs. Aaron has always enjoyed taking care of people and really listening to what they need to feel comfortable at work and in their interactions with him. This has been a common theme with all of his jobs, from taking care of children, managing a family-owned pizza place, to his work in film as craft service, and now his new career in paratransit. He's always enjoyed working and providing a service to the community in which he resides. Aaron is the father of an 11-year-old boy, Leifer, and loves going to concerts, playing disc golf, and enjoying the moments of breath and calm that he can find. Welcome to the Company Move, Aaron Ward.
Thank you for having me.
How you doing? Snackster. Oh.
I'm good. It's my day off. I have regular days off now, which is an adjustment, but it's good. It's good to be able to plan things like this.
I know, it's so exciting to see you. Aaron and I used to work together in Portland, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
You want to tell me a little bit about what your job was in film, how you got into it, and what your experience was?
Sure. So I, for the last 15 years, have been co-owner of Old School Craft Services with my wife, Rachel Lipsey. So I moved to Portland in the fall of '99 and was just working at a family-owned pizza place here in town for years. And I met Rachel. And when I met Rachel, she was already doing craft service, albeit on a much smaller scale.
She had that short bus, the little tiny...
She had a 1974, it was a 15-foot short bus.
Yeah.
And the name Old School Craft came from east of Portland. There is the Reynolds School District, and whoever owned the bus before her had scratched off all the letters in Reynolds except for Old. So when she bought the bus, it said Old School on the side of it. And so she was like, oh, Old School Craft, done.
That's it was so cool. I didn't know that.
It's very natural. And so my first gigs in the industry, because I was still working full time, I had 2 days as a PA on a little indie film. And then several months later, I was brought on as a catering assistant because I had a certain level of kitchen skills. And then in the winter of 2005, I did my first craft services gig with Rachel, just 2 weeks in Southern Oregon on a movie. And then I didn't work officially in film for 4 years after that because I had a full-time job. And there really wasn't much of an industry to speak of in Portland, aside from little indie films, little art house films, a lot of commercial work. Mm-hmm. So she was doing it full time, but I was not. And
were you guys together at that point, or didn't?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had only gotten into this world because she and I had been in a relationship.
Got it.
Our second date was going to a movie premiere of something she'd worked on before I worked with her. So I met a lot of our coworkers that we still work with, going on 20 years ago now, which is incredible. Mm-hmm. And then in the summer of 2009, one of the first episodic TV shows to be shot in the area in decades, Leverage came to town, and it was the first time that there was enough work for both of us. And it was like, okay, I think we can make this. We can make the push for this. And I was full time for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been great. It's been a fun ride. The last few years have been hard. The struggle because of, all of the things that have kind of affected the industry, not just in Oregon, but nationwide and in certain regard worldwide, have certainly hit our market. It's starting to come back. Mm-hmm. But I haven't actually worked on sets since June 30th of last year.
Wow.
So it was, we've had, seasonally the work comes and goes in this town because of the rain in the wintertime. So we would routinely have 3 and 4 months down in the winter. And, before our son was born, we would just leave the country for 6 weeks. It was
right.
Great.
Mainly Iceland.
Yeah. Yeah, several times. But I'd never done you get to the 7th and 8th month of nothing. And it was just like, okay, this is not sustainable. I mean, I'd love to. I just turned 45 in January. I'd love to be able to retire now, but
Yeah.
that's not in the cards. So, uh, yeah. So I had to start looking for something else.
Yeah. What was that full-time job that you had during the 4-year period between
Oh,
when
it was the
you
pizza place.
the pizza place?
It's a local family-owned place here. Or they have like 15 different locations. It's called Pizzicato here in
Oh yeah.
Portland. Yeah, so you've probably been there or heard of it. They used to have a spot downtown, just north of Pioneer Square. That was great. It was surrounded by hotels and concert venues, so it was almost like a precursor to it kind of took all of the starstruck aspects of having interactions with like, quote unquote famous people. I got very accustomed to that working in that job because we would get, musicians would come in, actors would come in, and it was kind of a constant rotation of regular customers and people traveling from all over the world. So I loved it. I absolutely loved that job.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
then you just got to translate it into working on set
Yeah,
in that
yeah,
way.
absolutely. Craft service was absolutely a very natural progression from that job. Like I didn't go to film school. I didn't, come up through the ranks as a grip or, electrician or costumes or anything like that. So being able to and I already had the benefit of the contacts, being in a relationship with Rachel for 4 years at that point. I had already met a lot of these people socially. So when I came on, like there 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 was a learning curve, of course, in terms of hours and the pace, and like Rachel was very smart early on, saying every day that we work has to count for three in terms of how we plan, um, because we don't know when the next gig is going to come. And we had a solid decade of pretty consistent work. We were really fortunate, um, and we built up to three trucks at one point,
Hmm.
working three crews, episodic movies. We've pretty much touched everything that's worked in town over the last 10 to 15 years that's of size, and made a lot of really good friends along the way.
Yeah, there's a great camaraderie and like
Yeah,
family in Portland
yeah,
that it's upsetting to see the change that's happened.
it really is.
Because there were, I mean, at one point there were what, 4 or 5 full-time TV shows shooting there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I bet we've lost 40% of our workforce in the last couple of years. People that
Hmm.
have been able to move or relocate permanently have. It has been a family environment. It's great to see, kids that came out of film school 20 years ago that are now gaffers and key grips and DPs and working
Hmm.
all over the world. We have story after story after story about how this kind of close knit community has been able to sustain growth um, for our friends and loved ones. And then COVID was a setback, but wasn't a main thing. It restructured how we did things in terms of, we weren't doing pass arounds on set. We weren't letting people in the truck to make their own coffees and sandwiches and grab their own things, which was
Hmm.
always kind of a part of our model. We went to more of a, we'll staff it and get you whatever you need. And we've retained some of that even as the restrictions have been lifted. It's just made things more efficient in that regard. But even when COVID hit, we were only down for like 4 months, and then we pretty much worked consistently for a year and a half or 2 years. I think it was just it's all of the restructuring that's happening after the strikes. There's a lot of still misconception about the way Portland operates as a city nationwide. There's a lot of taboo. Oh, we can't go film there. It's a no man's land, and we're having our share of issues just like any other city. But
Yeah, there's a
it's
houseless population.
absolutely.
There's issues in every city, and that's not
Yeah,
it's not dangerous to go there.
no. The thing is, these are new issues for Portland because I moved here in the fall of '99, and the population of the city has actually doubled in size in the 25 years I've been here.
Yeah.
So they're slow to come up with the infrastructure in the city for dealing with that influx of a population. So a lot of the like turning the corner night and day differences, they seem to come on quickly, but we're slowly mitigating those, and it's just going to take time. And it is bouncing back. life is coming back into the city, whereas people thought it was a dangerous place, and it's not a dangerous place.
No,
So,
no.
but I mean, I think some of that does play into, things not filming here. People just didn't want to film in our urban environment because of these, misconceptions. So as people are coming in and relaying back to their, their people elsewhere, we're seeing more and more work. There's a show in town now that's the biggest thing that's ever filmed in the city. Um, Grimm was an NBC show that filmed here for 7 or 8 years. This current show that Amazon's producing or putting on is bigger than Grimm. It's huge,
That's great.
which is great. There's hundreds of people working right now, which
Oh,
is
that's
awesome.
lovely. That's
Yeah,
great. I guess we should back up just a little bit.
sure. I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
Oh, no, I love it. I love it. Please ramble.
Sure, okay,
For people who aren't in the film industry, because I am trying to build a community with this podcast of
okay,
folks who are looking for good quality workers outside of the film industry.
uh-huh.
What is craft service? What is it that you do that you did on
Sure.
set? Yeah.
Sure. Craft services is a term that I was unfamiliar with, and I believe is a term that is specific to the film industry. We are food and drink support for crews as they make content. So we are not caterers. There are separate caterers that actually prepare pot meals for breakfast and lunch, sometimes dinner, depending on the contracts. We are there. I always tell people that have no idea what I do that a film shoot is it's kind of a traveling circus. And it's kind of like Las Vegas in that they don't want you wandering off to get food, snacks, drinks. They have to keep you there. We are essentially the blacked out windows of the film industry. Like we are there from the first moments that people get there, and we are often the last people to leave. But anything that you can think of in terms of all of the drinks, that's soft drinks, that's water, that's coffee, that's juices, it could be smoothies, it could be anything like that. And then food wise, it's everything from snacks, candy, chips, to sandwiches, more sustainable things, soups. We'll do big charcuterie boards that we would walk around set or partition
Cheese
out.
tray.
Cheese, cheese tray, the famous cheese tray.
And it doesn't
Um,
exist anymore.
not in that, we would make little boats now, like little individual cheese trays, but the bigger 40-pound ones that I would walk around set, I haven't done in a while. So we're basically there to provide whatever people might need, and we take care of all dietary restrictions. We're there for the run of the show, so it could be a couple of weeks, it could be 6 months. But we routinely work 16-hour days, and we're constantly shopping. So if somebody's like, oh hey, I prefer this kind of vegan cheese, like could you get that? Sure,
Mhm.
put it on the list, go buy it. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning and it's raining and you need coffee and some red vines, you come to me. If you missed lunch or you didn't like what the caterer had and you want to make a panini and have it with some salad, you come to me. Like it's kind of the whole range of, we're like the hot bar at a grocery store, I'm like the candy aisle at a 7-Eleven. I'm like, it's all of it. It's all of it. And it's fun. And it's for everyone. I love taking care of everyone equally, from a PA who's never been on set before and a production assistant who doesn't know where to stand. I love taking care of that person, checking in with that person. Hey, have you been drinking enough water? Do you need a cup of coffee? You know, Giving them the little things that kind of wake them up from the monotony they feel sometimes, to the A-list actors that come on and will hang out. I've had some great um, interactions with people who I grew up watching in TV shows and movies, who I very quickly learned were just normal people at work. And I would say, for the most part, 99.9% of the famous people I've worked with have all been very nice, very just forthcoming with personal stories, and um, just very excited to be there and very excited to have the experience the same that we are. So I love taking care of everyone. I don't like, we hear stories of people like, getting specific things for certain people, and if there are dietary restrictions involved, sure. But I also like to make that sort of thing available to anyone who might need it, not just specific people. So um, that's it in a nutshell, I guess.
That was great. I will say that old school craft, you and Rachel spoiled the crap out of us, because that is not the philosophy of all craft service in our industry.
It's funny. I've only met a couple of other craft service people because you hire one crew on and they're on for the show, so I don't really have much experience. I did work on a fairly sizable show that came out of and we don't really travel to work like most craft services that are hired when a production, even if it starts somewhere and goes somewhere else, they'll hire somebody locally. It doesn't make sense because essentially I'm just going to a grocery store and stocking a truck or stocking a table or setting up inside of a soundstage. So they can kind of get anyone to do it. There's a certain finesse to it, and especially when you're dealing with budgets that are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have to know how to make those things last. Um, but we've done all of our work in Oregon and Washington over the course of our career, which is great. But I have heard this by a number of people that we are kind of spoiling crews that a lot of people get into the industry through something like craft service because it is one of the few departments on set that I'm not actually responsible for anything that happens on camera per se. Like I don't, if the wardrobe malfunctions or if a camera runs out of batteries or the light changes and they have to, so none of that's on me. I'm the guy that comes in when everyone's frustrated and hands out food.
And they're
So
so happy to see you
they're
every
so
time.
happy. Like I am often we kind of joke that we're not just the foodies, we're also kind of the bartenders, the free counselors,
Oh, I don't know how
uh,
many times I sat on the old school craft truck and just chatted it up with you
yeah.
guys.
I mean, I'm pretty good at reading people in terms of like engagement. I've had people come on and they don't need anything. They just need a hug and they need to cry. You
Yeah.
know, you know. We also provide that. So I as this community has come up together, there have been a lot of those instances where we've all kind of helped each other through those specifically hard shoots. And it's always nice to look at a call sheet and see your friends in specific departments and go, okay, okay, even if this
It's
goes
gonna be a
south,
good one.
it's going
Yeah.
to be a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a fun ride. It's
Okay,
yeah.
well, so tell me about when you started to think about leaving the industry. Like, did you have an idea in mind already?
Yes, this is a craft services is a very physical job. What I was saying is that a lot of people will get into craft services as kind of a stepping stone to another department because it's one of the few departments on set where you can kind of see what everybody does. Like I oftentimes would have, I could stand next to the cameras, they're filming things, like I got to see how production worked, how the script supervisors work, what G&E was doing. Like the writer's room, like you see everything, construction, like so a lot of people that have assisted us over the years have gone on to costumes, grips, camera. Like they've gone on to other things. But and if you talk to a lot of people that are in those like, those higher positions, a lot of them started off as craft services. I've worked with DPs who 25 years ago, their first gigs on set were, being crafty in New York. You know,
Hmm.
but it's a very physical job. And after about a decade, we're in our 40s now. Rachel and I are both like, I don't know if I can physically do this for another 20 years. Like even if it was going well, there has to be some sort of pivot that gets me away from the actual physicality of it because I can do it now. I can do it a little bit less than I could a decade ago, but I didn't want to get to that point where my body was breaking down and I was, resentful of it. Or so over the last couple of years, we've actually been kind of bringing people up that can run the business. We're kind of overseeing everything, and then we've been pivoting over to even into transportation. So it's like we would get hired on as the driver for the craft service truck, and then somebody else would actually kind of work the craft service gig. And then I started getting van driving jobs with transportation. It's like, okay, well, is that something I can see myself doing? And but then the work started going away and we just weren't getting those calls. So, and even now as it's coming back, I mean, Rachel's finishing a month long movie shoot this week. She's still doing it, but there just wasn't enough work to sustain the two of us. Um, we'd have up years and down years. And when our son was born, we made a conscious decision to not overlap too much because we wanted one of us to kind of always be available for him. So that's been our model for us for the last, 5 to 7 years, where we really don't work at the same time. Um, but now there just isn't enough work to sustain us. So um, about a year ago now, um, we'd had like 6 months off, and I put together a resume, and I was laughing. It was the first resume I had written since the previous century. I had not put one together since the fall of 1999. I had not truly interviewed for a job in that long because I worked for 9 years at the pizza place. And then with film, once you start building a reputation, like we were kind of the only game in town at that level as far as like trucks being able to take care of hundreds of people. We had the reputation. So we were often hired 6 months or 6 weeks before a shoot would start, be like, hey, I need
Right.
to book you guys out for this chunk of time. So it wasn't like okay, there were a couple times where you get producers coming in from out of state, and you'd have to forward a resume, and which was usually just a list of clients and IMDb credits, like.
I think I can count on one hand the amount of times I've had to submit a resume since
Yeah.
I've been in the film industry. And it is just a list of like, it's either a link to your IMDb or a list of like the most recent credits.
Right, right, and maybe a number to call. Like, you can call this producer and talk to him if you want to.
Right.
So putting together a resume was funny because I still had a format from the 90s in my mind. So luckily I have friends that are not in the industry that are in various HR departments, and I'd forwarded it, and they're like, okay, the information is good. This format is ancient. Like, help me, please. So I started seriously looking about a year ago. I had something that was potentially a dream job kind of fall into my lap, and I applied for it, didn't get it. Fine.
Can you say more about that?
Sure. I have been an avid collector of music, going to shows, whatnot. There is a record pressing company here in Portland called Cascade Record Press. They were hiring a project manager, and I knew I had an associate who knew the owner. I knew the hiring coordinator, and my references were like people from the Shins and from Sleater Kinney, and
Mhm.
musicians that I had befriended over the years.
James
Uh,
Mercer lives across the street from
yeah,
Aaron and
James
Rachel,
Mercer is my
so
neighbor. Yeah, yeah. So he was on my resume. I was like, this is
uh-huh.
rock solid. Like, James Mercer's like calling the owner of Cascade, going, "You should probably hire Aaron." I'm like, I
Many
can't.
times staying there, I've seen James Mercer with a wheelbarrow full of dirt
Yeah, they
going to
do
his
like their
backyard.
landscaping. Yes. I know it. No interview. I don't know how many people applied for that job, but I never. That was
Oh,
like
you
the
didn't
first,
even
like,
hear
I
anything?
I heard nothing.
Oh man.
So I was like, okay. But well, I was trying to figure out how to translate what I do in terms of craft services, which is a singular thing. And it's like, okay, what are the transferable skills? There's customer service, there's project management, there's budget management, there's all of these things. But I don't have a degree. Like, I have a 2-year transfer degree that's 25 years old. So I don't even have the bachelor's to fall
Mm.
back on. So I was met with this, like, okay, I'm probably just getting weeded out based on those like little benchmarks, where I contemplated, do I go back to school? Like, what am I interested in? What do I want to be when I grow up? Like, um, and so that didn't pan out. And then I worked a couple smaller gigs in film, and then after July 1st, there was nothing. And so I spent months and months and months trying to figure it out. The next one was another, like a house manager. The Portland Art Museum opened a new film archive movie theater in Southeast Portland, and again, mutual friends with the people who run the Northwest Film Archive that were in charge of this. And I applied to be the general manager for that thing. Never heard anything. Like,
Mm.
it was kind of deflating. Like, okay, I could see how I could transition into these industries, but it just wasn't happening. So once I got to about 6 months, 7 months of no work, I was like, okay, looking at seasonal stuff. I drove for UPS leading up to the holiday season, just out of my own personal car. And I was like,
I
okay,
know a
it was,
bunch of camera operators here that did
yeah.
that too.
I started I started answering the call. There's a local stagehands local in town that whenever there's overflow for like concert breakdowns or theater breakdowns. They'll email our IATSE local and say, "Hey, does anybody want to work?" So I said yes to that a couple times, and I would go and I would see like a dozen film people there that
Yep.
are like, "Yeah, man, like there's nothing." So I wasn't the only one in that boat.
And that's nationwide
Yeah,
as well. It's
yeah,
not Portland is a smaller market, but it's
yeah.
happening in LA, it's happening in Chicago.
I just saw Susie Dietz, whom you know.
Oh yeah.
I saw her like 3 weeks ago, and she and her husband, who live and work in LA, same thing. Like she's not getting the calls, and she was getting calls for work worldwide, but the people that would call her are now taking like, C camera operator gigs because there's just nothing.
Right.
Like there's just no work. So I got to the spring, and then I started like, okay, what are the skills that I can actually maybe get hired for? And I started looking at like me. Okay, I've been driving this 30-foot craft service truck for 15 years, so I started applying for like medium duty box truck delivery jobs. And I was like, this could just be like a means to an end, just something to do for the next year. I started applying at like FedEx and Staples and Amazon and all of these things. Oh, one funny one, if you want a funny story.
I do.
Um, I applied to be a post office or a postal worker, just a neighborhood postman, and I failed the psych test.
What?
This is like I was kind of embarrassed and also really kind of proud of myself in the same way. Like it
How do
was,
you
I don't know, like it was amazing. It was like a series of like 75 questions that would kind of learn from the last one. It was like hypotheticals. Okay, you're at work and you have X amount of work to do, and you have a new guy or a new person who is struggling. Do you stop doing what you're doing to help them? Do you offer your support? So say, hey, I can answer questions if you have it, but I need to work on this. Or do you ignore them completely? And I was like, well, I would offer support. Like I'll keep doing my job, but it was questions like that. And then there was no feedback at the end. It just said failed, and I was like, well, not only did I fail it, I am ineligible to take any or to apply for any job that requires that test for a year.
Wow, that's wild.
It's so wild. Like there has to be a Cliff Notes like cheat sheet somewhere. I'd never failed a test in my life.
Gotta Google the dark web for that.
Oh my God, it was so funny. Failed. And then of course every post office like we're hiring sign I'd see, I'm just like, "Arr." um the other thing that I was really excited about was I was actually onboarding to be a 911 operator
Oh wow.
with the city of Portland. I started looking. My dad actually was like, look at city jobs because the pensions are usually good. And a lot of them are like 2-year appointments. So I was looking at environmental studies. We do a lot of stuff, or we've done a lot of research and work with recycling and compost over the
Mm-hmm.
years with the city. Um, because of we kind of bring all the stuff to set. So I try and make sure that it goes to where it needs to go.
Yeah, film
Um,
sets are notoriously wasteful in
yes,
nature.
so we have struggled with and tried to combat that as much as we possibly can. So I started looking at city jobs, and 911 operator popped up, and I was like, maybe that's really interesting. Like I hadn't actually thought about the process of getting that job. And so there were 3 or 4 different loopholes, tests, psychological tests that I didn't fail. um
Yeah.
Typing tests, that sort of thing. Can your brain do, multiple things at the same time? Like we're gonna give you a 10-digit mix of numbers and letters, and then you have to type it out immediately afterwards, like short-term memory retention, all this stuff. Passed all of that. And then I got to the interview, and it was me on a computer screen with 4 people, and I'd never done that in any kind of professional capacity. And that's where the feedback was I just didn't answer the question effect some of the questions effectively enough, and they were weeding people down and whatnot. But
Mm-hmm.
the training for that gig is 3.5 years. It's insane. It's
Wow.
intense.
Wow, it's
Yeah,
important.
so it's important. I mean, and that was my whole deal. Like if I don't get this, it's because somebody more qualified is there, and that's who I want on the phone if I ever have to make that phone call.
Yeah.
But while I was applying for that, I had all these feelers out for these box delivery jobs, FedEx, Staples, whatever. That's where the paratransit kind of came on my radar, and it was kind of a perfect. It scratches the same itch that 911 does. It's a feel good job, and I applied and trained, and now I love it.
What is paratransit?
So, I am the transportation company in Portland, Oregon is TriMet. They're the ones who do the city buses, the light rail, the trains, and they have a paratransit division, which is shorter buses. And basically, we service it's a door-to-door service for anyone with mobility issues, and so they have to qualify for it. Once they qualify, and I didn't realize just how extensive this program was. It's really quite incredible. Once they qualify, we go anywhere that the umbrella of public transportation in the city goes, and they pay bus fare for door to door service.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I will give people rides that are 45 minutes long and it costs them $2.80.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So it was a month of training. So we service anybody again with mobility issues. That could be mental and physical handicaps. It could be um, we do a lot of like dialysis patients, a lot of people who are going for hospital visits, rehab. But it could also just be they qualify for. I don't understand all of the benchmarks for qualification, but they can call these rides and take them anywhere. I take grandmothers to hair appointments.
Oh, I love that.
I take people to the grocery store. I work on Sundays, so the first half of my day is all church runs everywhere. But I go to a lot of like adult foster care facilities. I have nonverbal people that I pick up. I pick up, blind and deaf. And like it was a month of like figuring, being trained on how to do different securements for wheelchairs and scooters and kind of like your basic wheelchair to your fully automated reclined head cradled, like the whole bit. So it's great in that I'm not picking up just the general population. They have to call these rides in advance. I know who I'm picking up. But one of the main things that's awesome about it is that they prioritize safety over anything else. So if you're applying for a job that is an Amazon or a Staples or delivery, a wine delivery job, whatever it is, it's go, 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 go all day long. There's no room for slowing down. This job, they understand that with the population we're servicing, um, anything can happen at any time to delay. There could be accidents. There could be, luckily, I haven't had anything major that's happened. Um, and my responsibility is just to get people from point A to point B safely, regardless of how long that takes. So I do have like a manifest, a computer screen that shows like when my pickups are like, and they have like a 30-minute window of time that I have to get there in. But if I start getting later and later in those windows of time, the rides later on in my day will disappear and go to other drivers. Like they'll just take care of it. I don't have to worry. I don't have to drive erratically.
There's no
I just
quota that you
There's
have
no
to,
quota.
yeah.
I'm not waiting around for people. Like I pick somebody up, I drop them off at the grocery store, and then somebody else comes and gets them when their pickup time is. Like it's not round trip rides. It's just I'm kind of all over the state or all over the city. So I drive between 100 and 120 miles a day. It's a union gig,
You're state funded Uber essentially.
essentially. But
Yeah.
the awesome thing about this and what I hear all day long is thank you, because a lot of these people, before they knew about the service or started using the service, were kind of trapped in their homes.
Yeah.
Like if you took an Uber, once a week, you 40 to $60, sometimes one way. And if you're on a fixed income or if you have no income or if you're in like a retirement community, you just can't do it. But at
Hmm.
$2.80, people are out. Like I pick up, like I said, I take people to hair appointments. I drive people to their grocery stores. I take on Father's Day, I was just taking people all over town to have barbecues with their dads. Like it's they're able to have lives. And the service pretty much runs 24 hours a day.
That's
So
awesome.
it's awesome. And it fits my like I like I said, I like working and kind of servicing the community I live in. I like that I have a job that is absolutely an essential service for these people. And it gives me um, the experience of meeting people that are kind of in different, all forms of life that I wouldn't normally, just in my run of the mill day to day times, ever really meet. So I'm meeting it's just like cross section of Oregonians, or just people at large that are just really interesting and really funny, and finding, I have one guy that's nonverbal that just makes faces at me in the rearview mirror the whole time, and I'm like, "Are you making faces at me?" And he just stops, looks up a little bit, and then I'll keep driving. I'll look up, and he's making faces again, and this will go on for 45 minutes. Um, I have a lot of really really fun interactions like that. And the longer that I do it, because I have fixed days that I work, I do see some of the same people over and over again, and it's been really fascinating that like people that I thought were nonverbal were just getting used to me, and now as they're warming up, like we're having conversations, and it's really quite wonderful.
Oh,
I
that's great.
really
You're
I
able to
really
build relationships with
Yeah,
people, community.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a trip though. I work 40 hours a week.
That's wild. I mean, we're not used to that in the film industry.
No,
We work minimum 70
I've
sometimes.
hit 40 hours by like lunch on Wednesday,
Right.
like, but it's
Especially in
if
craft
it's
service. Yeah.
benefits, craft service, like I know my schedule, I know my days off for the next 6 months, and then we bid for like if we want to tweak our schedules. There's some stability that I'd forgotten about in terms of working in film that is really nice. There's some things that are taking some adjustments. The time off is nice, like in between gigs, you'll have a month you can do whatever you want.
Mm.
Those days are gone. But that's always kind of been a very specific thing that no one else I know out of the industry has access to. So
Yeah.
it's okay to go
Um,
back into the private sector.
can you talk about the process of getting hired? Like how was your interview process with this specific job? Like what was the application like?
So I had it.
How involved?
It wasn't as intense. It was just a phone interview. I got the job was through, I can't remember if it was like Indeed, or I was signed up for three or four of those, like,
Mm-hmm.
resumes out, and as I'd been on them long enough, they start sending me all these, apply for this, recruiters for this, like, so it was a phone interview, and they had a training session that was coming up, and just some basic questions. Why do you want to work for this organization? Do you have experience driving vehicles? This is not a CDL job. You don't have to have any big truck driving experience. And the parent company, Transdev, is worldwide. I actually looked; they operate out of Chicago as well. I could do the exact same thing I'm doing now. I could transfer to Chicago, but people could apply to work.
Come on out,
Yeah, yeah,
all
right.
of you.
So, it, so as far as the application, that I sent my resume in, my updated non-whack formatted resume I sent in, and I have always been comfortable working in kind of blue collar jobs. I come from a blue collar family. I grew up in Kansas City. My dad retired out of UPS after 42 years. Um, I've always kind of worked, amongst drivers, truck drivers, and just like people who made an honest living by working hard. And I think that came across in the phone conversation. Like, look, I like taking care of people. I'm comfortable driving these vehicles. I know the streets. I can follow a map. Like, you know, after that, it was pretty straightforward. Okay, come in for the training, and it was 4 weeks of training. It was 2 weeks of just 8 hours of videos in a classroom setting about all these ADA rules, and different, just the list goes on and on and on. And then there was hands on, like just shadowing somebody. You spent 3 10-hour days, or 3 days, just riding along with somebody in. They do transit vans, and then they also do like these 30-foot trucks, just riding along on their routes, seeing how they do things, talking to them about it. And then as you got more comfortable, they would let you like help people, and practice securing. There's a closed course driving element of it. It was 3 days of just tones in a parking lot, backing up, turning around, doing all the things. And then 3 days of just driving with just me and the supervisor who was training me. And then another 3 days of me actually doing a route with my trainer in the vehicle. And then once there was a final drive. And then once that was done, I was kind of sent out on my own. And now I go to work. I get my my computer screen, I get my truck assignment, I go sign up, and then I'm gone for the day. I'm essentially by myself for the 10-hour shift.
Oh, it's a 10-hour shift. Okay.
I work 4 10s, which is great. I have 3 days off a week, but I can pick up day 5 and day 6 if I want, without asking. There's all kinds of available shifts and whatnot. I'm actually picking up a shift tomorrow because my son is at a sleepaway camp this week. So tomorrow I picked up a shift that's basically going to be 10 hours of OT. Um, it's pretty great, flexible wise. So I'm 7:30 in the morning until 5:30 in the afternoon.
Wow,
I
what
can
is
still go to
that
shows. I can
like?
still go to shows. The
You could go to
transition,
dinner with friends?
yeah, yeah. I had dinner on Monday night and got home, got to bed, got like, yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
7:30 to 5:30, 4 days a week. They can never ask me to work on my days off. Um, and so I have those 3 days, and I chose the three midweek days for the summertime so that I could. Yeah, I took Leifer and my son. He and I went out to the coast last week, did an overnight. We don't have to deal with the weekend warriors. So it's like
Right.
we can go camping, we can go to the beach, we can go karting, we could go play frisbee golf, and we're not dealing with everybody who has the weekends off. So it's pretty awesome.
Oh,
It's pretty awesome.
right.
Yeah.
So we've basically touched on a lot of how your skills translate perfectly to this type of work. What were some of the biggest hurdles to the transition? And is there anything that you wish you would have done differently in the process?
The biggest hurdle, I think, for me, in terms of the transition was the resume building process and actually being able to convey what I do. It's hard to put that on a 1 page resume. I feel like there were a few phone interviews I had, where I was able to kind of accurately convey what it is I do and the different elements that I do. Because if you're trying to find the drop down menu of what we are, it's like we're
Hmm.
we're not really restaurant workers. I mean, we own,
Entertainment.
yeah,
Like,
nothing quite fits. So
yeah.
you don't want to mislead people, but a lot of times just getting people on the phone to be like, okay, so what is it you do? So that was a hurdle. Um, uh, yeah, and then I found myself like trying to look for the dream job right out of the gate with the record pressing and the movie theater, and like so I'd wait um, to send out resumes until I found something that I was like, oh, this could be really good. And then my father-in-law was actually really smart. He's like, dude, just blast it. Send out resumes every day. Jobs you don't want. Take interviews for jobs you don't want. And just getting into the mindset of getting over that mental hurdle of, well, I don't really want to do this. And he's like, who cares? It's experience. Like you need the experience of taking the interview so that when you do get the interview of something you want, um, you've kind of honed those skills. And I think I failed myself a little bit on that when it came to the 911 because I was really into that gig. Like I I I was really into like the possibilities of that job. And I think I'd be really good at it. But my interview skills just weren't up to par. And so I got weeded out. So I think the process of applying for jobs was hard to kind of navigate. I think I kind of shot myself in the foot before I even tried some of the times just because it's a foreign thing for me. I've spent the last 15 years just kind of just getting all the jobs that I want because they come to me, like so being on the flip side of that has been a little difficult. And then like the funny like reality checks of like applying for days off and being told no. I'm like, what do you mean no? What do you I can do this. I can take this thing. And they're like, no, you can't. You have responsibilities. I'm like, okay, you're right. You're right. I everything that TransDev does is based on seniority, and I actually took a picture and sent it to my dad because there's 167 drivers at this location, and I am number 167. I was like, oh, you got to start somewhere, and he's like, I can only go up. I'm dead last.
Seniority is going to take a while for that one. You said that you had a little bit of help translating your skills.
Yeah,
What was the process of like building your resume and actually getting those skills I can tell you my experience as well, but I
yeah.
want to hear.
In film, we work with people who have a bunch of different skill sets, and I found that the producers that I knew could help me out in terms of like if you were hiring a production assistant or like a production supervisor. I mean, because I was looking for supervisory roles. Like
Right.
there were a lot of things. I even applied for like the Oregon Symphony for their ticket agents or front of house general manager, and I was like, look, I'll come in and work the ticket floor for a year before because I don't know that specific model, but I've been running a business effectively for 15 years.
Hmm.
Like I don't want to just come in and like be making minimum wage um, to work sacking groceries. I'm not above doing that, but I need to know that like there's a way we're headed in this. Um, and so I reached out to some of the producers that I knew, um, just to say, hey, look, like what, this is kind of what I'm thinking, just to get feedback. And they were all very positive, and I had some great. And then reaching out to, like I said, like human resource people who are friends of mine that do hiring in jobs that aren't in the film industry. And I'm like, what are the benchmarks that you guys look for? What weeds people out? So it's just reaching out to my support network, um, inside and outside of film, to try and figure out how to word some of this stuff, just to get my foot in the door. And it worked to a certain extent. And then some of those jobs that I never heard about, for my own ego, I tell myself that there's just millions of people applying for them, and my name got lost in the shuffle.
I think a lot of them use AI to weed out, like if you're not using the keywords, they just weed
That's
out.
just it. I mean, you
Yeah.
can Google, benchmark words to use or to not use, depending on what kind of job you're looking for. It was interesting. I actually contemplated going back to school for a little bit because all of my previous life, when I was in school, all of my interests and aspirations were science based. I was pre med for a little while.
Wow.
Um, I was really into biological sciences, life sciences, anatomy, physiology, that sort of thing. So I found myself even just in early like brainstorming, looking at everything that I was interested in. I was looking at a lot of like wetland life sciences, biology type based, laboratory stuff, things that I had some exposure to, but 25 years ago.
Right.
Um, so like hospital jobs, and it very quickly became like, hey, you're not really qualified for any of this um,
Yeah.
until you go back and get some schooling. So will that be the future? I don't know. I don't know how this transportation thing is going to work. Can I see myself doing it for forever? I don't like to think in those terms, but for the foreseeable future, yeah, unless something drastic happens or there's some element of it that I'm have not been exposed to yet. This is absolutely something that I can see myself doing for a while and finding very rewarding for a while. There's certain aspects of film that translate to it in that I'm in a different place every day. I'm seeing different parts of the city. I'm meeting amazing people left and right, but also dealing with hardships, hearing a lot of tragic stories. Is using different parts of my brain that, like we've all been subject to these hostile work environments on set where you have people that are screaming at you. And sometimes it's for valid reason, and a lot of times it's just because they're as frustrated as everybody else. And, you know, oftentimes I would be the punching bag because I'm the food guy. Like, you're not actually mad because I ran out of chunky peanut butter. I've been yelled at
I
because I ran out of chunky
know.
peanut butter. I'm like,
Or you're bringing
if
the snack out when we're not ready, or
yeah, exactly. I'm like, or it's cold. I'm like, well, you made me sit outside for 25 minutes. I know it's cold. I'm sorry.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
so. There's a lot of transferable stuff, but yeah, I've lost my train of thought.
It's okay. It was
Sorry.
great. You're doing great.
We're okay. Okay.
What would you say to an employer who's looking for good candidates for their business about hiring film industry people?
I think film industry people are very adaptive. I think they handle change, rapid change sometimes, professionally, and are motivated to uh, work hard. I have not, the people that last in film are the ones that self motivate, and they work their butts off sometimes without even realizing it, because the pace of this industry can be like breakneck. Like if you bring somebody on a set and actually show them how these things are made, they're often left with kind of a mixture of awe and disgust. Like, how do people do, like how do people do this for jobs, and I think it speaks to the resilience of uh, uh, the film crew at large. but also you can kind of throw anything at them and they'll figure out a way to figure it out. And I mean, it's not just, I mean, for me, my world was always pretty straightforward, but we had to deal with the elements, like how do you keep coffee cold when you have to throw all your equipment in a snowcat and it's 20 below zero with the wind chill, like figure it out, like, okay. So there's a lot of elemental things, but then also like these extreme conditions of sometimes mental stress, like, okay, how do we problem solve this? How do we get all of this world over here with the general population? Just all of these factors. I think film employees are really, like I said, really adaptive and hardworking, and they've seen it all. So there's a certain kind of level-headed zen that comes over them sometimes when a situation might be a little too chaotic for some. They get calmer.
I never knew this really about myself, but I noticed like if someone else around me is losing their shit or stressed, I generally get calm. I do get
Yeah,
calmer. I didn't realize
yeah,
that that was like a
yeah.
universal thing.
Yeah. It's
But
weird when you see it from
yeah,
from an outside perspective, like when things are just kind of chaotic. I see it especially with like key set PAs or base camp PAs, like just total chaos, and they're just standing there, just like, okay, okay. You're like, how are you standing still right now? And it's just weird, like, uh, just kind of like laser focus on what actually needs to happen.
the calm in the storm, being able to like
It's the
look
calm in the
around and see
storm.
what needs to happen next after this freak out's over.
Yeah. And then after the calm, they might sneak away and lose it for a few minutes. They probably do.
What advice would you give to someone who is in the film industry that's looking to make a career pivot? Like what would you tell them to how do they even start?
I would say if you're in a film industry and you want to make a pivot, like lean on your skills that you've acquired while working in the industry and see how you can. Like for me, the fallback for me was the truck driving. When I realized that like I didn't quite have on paper the managerial skills for like project management, or even though I'm equipped in all these things, like I was missing out on some of the benchmarks as far as like hiring for that stuff. I was like, okay, what skills do I have that I could actually just get a job? um and for me it was driving, and I was like, that's such a minimal part of what we do, but I've owned this rig for 15 years, I'm very comfortable driving it, and a lot of people aren't. So just finding that skill set to kind of like get you out. And then once you're out, um, just kind of going from there, and letting the experience kind of guide you. At least that was that was how I worked. Um, there are realizing that there are some differences. Like we work concentrated years in film, so the paychecks are often great. The paychecks are not as great, and so, but when Rachel finishes a job Thursday and then she has nothing else booked until maybe August, I will have income. It will keep coming. So you just kind of
Right.
have to restructure your brain a little bit into, the things that have been appealing about film, um, can be appealing about other things. They're just or different jobs, but it's just a different beast. I don't know. It was one of the things I had to kind of re-explain to Lafer, my son, when I started looking for full-time work. He was freaked out because I was looking for a gig that I was going to be working full-time. And then I realized pretty quickly, I was like, no, 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 buddy, I'm not going to be working 80-hour weeks forever.
Because his
Because
only definition of full time is what you guys do.
yeah,
Oh,
which was
wow.
which was
Yeah.
us either completely available or completely not available. So when
Wow.
I
So he
started looking for
assumed.
work, he assumed that he was just never going to see me again. And it took a minute before I was like, "Oh, no, 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 it's fine. Shit, think about all your other friends and their parents. Like, you see them all the time, right? Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, and what's normal to him is you guys, yeah. You're like,
Yeah,
that's actually the normal thing.
yeah.
Your friend's parents.
We've been living in a little bit of a fantasy world for your entire life. So yeah, so that was interesting. But I also had to kind of like restructure my brain
Hmm.
in terms of like full-time work. Full-time. Like I don't know if I can hack it. And then I'm like, wait, full-time is 38 to 40 hours a week. Yeah, I can totally do that. It's just making the effort, really. I mean, like I said, I've spent so long. I was trying to figure out the time to make the effort because we've had months off at a time. And it was just kind of this perfect storm where, it's like, okay, there really isn't enough work. And so we either have to travel, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want to relocate people. People tell us to come to LA for 20 years and like going to LA. People are,
I think I was one of those people. I was like, you guys are the
yeah.
best craft service in the country. You should come down here.
Oh God. I think the first yeah, crew members, Bryce Dallas Howard hounded us for a while. She's like, you have to come to Los Angeles. I'm like, I'm not coming to Los Angeles, Bryce.
She needs to produce more stuff in Portland.
Yes, you need to come to me. If you like this so much, come to me. Um,
You heard it here on the Company Move podcast.
watch her phone in. Be like, no, Bryce, no, I'm done. I'm out. I'm out.
If we get, I'm happy if we have 5 people listening to this podcast. If we get Bryce Dallas Howard listening, I'm all good. My producer just said absolutely fantastic.
Great. We'll make some calls.
um, just a couple more questions. Is
Sure.
there? I know that we've already kind of touched on this. Is there anything you miss about set?
I do. I miss. We've made some really good friends. I miss you. Like I
Oh,
miss
I
seeing
miss
your
you too,
face.
friend.
Like it's funny. Like we have these concentrated chunks of time where you're just with somebody more than you're with anybody else in your life.
Yeah.
And and for some people we do it over and over and over again. And then so I visited, I took Layford to visit his mom on set last week, and there were people on set I hadn't seen in a couple of years. And so it was very easy to get sucked back into this, like, oh man, I miss you guys. And I do. But I've also hung out with some of them socially since then. Like I can actually make those calls and be like, hey, let's go have a drink, let's go have dinner, let's go to a movie, let's go to a park. Like it's okay to also hang out with them not at work.
Yeah.
So I do miss kind of being in it. And it was never, I always said that, craft services for me was 20% food and 80% of the experience. And I still firmly believe that. Like, it doesn't matter how good or bad the actual food. I mean, of course it matters how good or bad the food is, but uh, being able to like show up with a smile on your face when somebody's at their worst or having their worst day, and being able to like help them through that meant more to me than any of the cheese trays I ever made. Like that's what I miss. That's absolutely what I miss.
Oh, you make me cry.
Okay.
Do you ever see yourself going back?
You want to know something really funny?
What?
I'm working on Tuesday.
Ha!
I'm not going back.
She
I'm
reeled
not
you
going.
back in.
No. No, I was laughing with the transpo coordinator yesterday about this. I was like, I'm going to be doing a podcast about how I've been getting out of film, and I'm actually going for a drug test today so I can drive a van on Tuesday. Like I said, the biggest thing that's ever filmed in the city is filming now. It's an Amazon shoot, and we know everybody that's involved. We're not involved in this one, but we know everybody else. And I was downtown at a record store yesterday, and they were shooting 2 blocks up. And so I walked up to the transpo trailer to talk to Dave DeTroy and JP, and my brother-in-law was doing locations, and Tyler Boggs was there, and like these are
Oh,
people that are like family, right?
yeah.
And so I went up and I was just hanging out with him for a while. Like I said, I have 3 days off, and I can pick up a fifth day at overtime at my current job if I want. And he was like, "Well, you could just work here for it." I was like, I can't commit to anything." And he's like, "Totally fine." It's kind of the perfect storm in that it's big enough that I don't have to commit to anything. I can just call the transpo captain and say, "Hey, if you need somebody on Tuesday, I have Tuesday available." And his response is, "Okay," or "No." And I have a good enough relationship because we've known each other for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not taking somebody else's job. I was just like, hey, if there are ever big days on Tuesdays, maybe I can come in. And there's a big day on Tuesday, so I'm going in. So,
Hey, you know what? You're still not relying on Hollywood to pay you for a
oh no,
living.
no, 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 no. And I've already gotten 4 text messages from friends going, I hear we're gonna see you on Tuesday. This is amazing. That's why I'm working on Tuesday, not
Yeah, you get to
because
like
I get
come
to
in
hang
and
out
say
with.
hi.
I get to come in and say hi. I get
Mm-hmm.
to come in, sit in an air conditioned van, drive people around all day, catch up
Get
with
get
the
paid
people
well.
that get paid well. But but actually catch up with like the experience that I had yesterday. I hung out in the transpo trailer for an hour, and it was just like we were just talking, because these are guys that, you know, I'm not going to see on a regular basis anymore. So that when they are around town and I know about it, I can pop in and say hi anytime I want.
Mhm.
But if I can also like spend the day hanging out, yes, getting paid, but not relying on it, um, it's a fun kind of thing. And if it becomes too much schedule wise, I can just tell them I'm not available, and they're not relying on me. They're not. It's just kind of the perfect thing. So, do I see myself going back to film full time? Not in any capacity that I can foresee at this point. You know,
Right.
they actually offered me a full-time transportation job on this show, and I turned it down because I had just gotten hired at Transdev with the paratransit, and I really liked it. And I was like, look, I realize I'm turning down a substantial amount of money, but this job will be there when this gig is over. And this is my health insurance, and this is my, all of the things. And I am not taking this job as a means to an end, which is what some of the other driving jobs felt like when I was applying to them. This feels like more of a no, I can see myself doing this. And so I don't want to jeopardize that opportunity, um, by the carrot that's dangled, um, because it's the first one that's been dangled in years. Like, no. So,
Yeah.
do I see myself getting sucked back in? Maybe. Maybe I do this for a year or two and I hate it, and the industry comes back, and I'm able to do it for a little while longer. Who knows? But at this point in my life, no. I think I'm from a craft service standpoint, I can't see myself doing that full time anymore. um, it's a lot. It's a lot, and the people that we've trained that have come up under us are phenomenal. Like
That's great.
I have no qualms with the people that Rachel's working. Well, Rachel's still doing it, and then the people who are working with her they can run shows by themselves. They don't need us there anymore. So it's kind of a great little like time to just step away. Good luck to anyone that's trying to get out. I've heard that it's a struggle for a lot of people, and I think the longer you're in the industry, maybe the more of a struggle it is. Even in talking to the transportation guys yesterday, they're like, we've been doing this for 25, 30 years.
Mhm.
Like there's no it's a really hard thing to try and reinvent yourself, especially like I said, I'm 45, so trying to figure out like how to get back into a workforce that I've been out of for 20 years is a daunting thing. And my dad struggled with that as well. Like with any industry that you're in for a long time, trying to do something totally different. I think that's what kept him at UPS as long as he was. He was in a really good position, but I think he would have liked to do something else, but he just got to a point where he just couldn't. Like they're just
Yeah.
it didn't make sense financially from his responsibilities to do something else. So I would say before you get to that point, um, if there's something else you want to do it. Take the chance while you can.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's I mean the whole point of this podcast is to give some inspiration
Yeah,
to folks who think that their skills don't translate or that
yeah.
they're just stuck. So I think you definitely gave some good
But
information.
the beautiful thing about it is you can always go back. Like
Yeah.
you can. I mean, I know people that have been out for years and then they show back up. Like they try other gigs, they try other careers. Even they have families, they
Yeah.
move out of town, and then something happens, or their lives change. They come back, they get back into it. Like I think that was always kind of the thing I tried to fall back on, even when I moved away from home at 20, and I was terrified. I'd never lived anywhere other than Kansas City and Lawrence when I was in college, and I was moving 2,000 miles away. And I think it was my mom that actually said, "You can always come back."
Oh.
And I was like, "You know what? You're right. Worst case scenario is I come back to this place of love, so it's worth taking the step." You know, I spent so much time, even through this process, worrying about kind of the greater umbrella of it's too hard, I can't do it. Without even taking the step. Like, take the step. Like, just do it. Do something small. Break it down into small compartments. If this first thing is making a resume, great. It doesn't even have to be that. Apply for a job and don't send a resume. Like, just get through that first mental hurdle of whatever's keeping you back, because that's what it. I remember just looking at all these job listings for months and not applying to anything, or oh, I'll get to it tomorrow, or I'll, and I just there was some sort of mental blockade that was going on. And then finally, when I was able to just like, there's no responsibility to this process. Like, apply for the things that, like I said, that maybe you don't want to do, or you have a fading or a fleeting interest in, because it's the experience to get you up to actually jumping on the one that does make sense for you. But there's so much like doom and gloom that you can worry about that is just hypotheticals holding you back, and it's a hard thing to get past, but once you do, it makes the process a lot less anxiety ridden.
Oh, I love that. That's such great advice. That's a really great place to end. Thank you, Aaron, for all
Thank
your
you for
time and
having
all
me.
your advice. And love you, man. I'm so happy
I
to
love
see you.
too. Yeah, you too. Don't be a stranger.
All right.
Company Move is produced by me, Rennie Pollock, and is produced and edited by Robin Lavecchio. Thanks to Selena Persiani for designing our graphics. Our theme music was written by Cliff Beach and performed by Cliff Beach and Alex Nestor. You can follow Cliff on Spotify. Our interstitial music was composed and performed by Gabe Rosen. A special thank you to Keaton Susky for naming our podcast. Have questions, suggestions, or want to be a guest? Write us at companymovepod@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at companymovepod. Please follow and rate us on whatever platform you listen to us on. That's a wrap for this week, y'all. Thanks for listening. Come on back next week for a new episode of the Company Move podcast.